From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
The Justice Department indicts former President Donald Trump for unauthorized retention of classified documents and obstruction of justice, a case that will roil the 2024 presidential campaign and possibly the political scene for years to come. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, columnist Kim Strassel and editorial board member Monet Ukwe-Barua. Let's start with a clip of Special Counsel Jack Smith at a news conference only a few minutes ago unveiling this federal indictment.
Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with felony violations of our national security laws, as well as participating in a conspiracy to obstruct justice. This indictment was voted by a grand jury of citizens in the Southern District of Florida, and I invite everyone to read it in full to understand the scope and the gravity of the crimes charged. The men and women of the United States intelligence community and our armed forces dedicate their lives to protecting our nation and its people. Our laws that protect national defense information are critical to the safety and security of the United States, and they must be enforced. Violations of those laws put our country at risk. Adherence to the rule of law is a bedrock principle of the Department of Justice, and our nation's commitment to the rule of law sets an example for the world. We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone.
And here is Trump on Truth Social last night responding to the indictment.
We're leading against Biden by a lot, a tremendous amount. And we went up to a level that they figure the way they're going to stop us is by using what's called warfare. And that's what it is. This is warfare for the law. And we can't let it happen. We can't let it happen. Our country is going to hell. And they come after Donald Trump, weaponizing the Justice Department, weaponizing the FBI. We can't let this continue to go on because it's ripping our country to shreds. We have such big problems, and this shouldn't be one of them.
Kim, President Trump's attorneys confirmed on Thursday night that he'd been charged, and a lot was already said before the indictment was unsealed. But I definitely agree with Jack Smith on one thing. Now we have the document itself. If people don't want to hear about it through a filter of the media or reporter, go find it online. It's about 49 pages, double-spaced. Kim, what is your read of this document and the allegations in it?
So 37 charges against Trump. On their face, they certainly sound very serious. Lots of words like conspiracy. Just to go through a few of them, 31 of those 37 charges are related to the possession of and retention of and willful refusal to return documents. And I find this kind of interesting because it's going to raise some questions of other people who have also been found to be in possession of documents, and yet were not charged for it. That would include Mike Pence most recently, who said that after all of this came out, he went and searched his residency. He had some. They decided it was a mistake on his part, and nothing happened. They closed the case. Hillary Clinton, who had tons of classified information on an unauthorized server and looked to destroy some of the evidence, that she was accused of being reckless with that information, but not charged with it. And I think this is notable as well, too, because while the indictment sort of tries to suggest as though Trump oversaw the removal of all of these documents from the White House to his personal place in Mar-a-Lago, when you look at it, what's really clear is that there were simply tons upon tons of Trump mementos. He's known for doing this, newspaper clippings, et cetera, and that things were mixed in there. So was that an accident? I don't know, but there does seem to be two standards here, at least in terms of the possession question. A couple of the other ones are a little bit more serious. One is a claim that he actually moved boxes around and had one of his helpers move boxes around in a deliberate attempt to keep his attorney, who was charged with complying with the subpoena to return documents, from actually viewing all the boxes. I think when we get Trump's defense, it'll be interesting to see what he says, because one thing that seemed missing to me in the indictment is any claim. I mean, this was certainly asserted, but there was no proof that this was done deliberately, in that there were a lot of boxes that were being moved all over the place. And that is very clear in the indictment, stuff getting shuffled all over Mar-a-Lago all the time. The other one, which will really stick out and is going to get a lot of attention, is a transcript that is included in there, in which supposedly Trump shows a writer and a publisher and some of his staffers a document which supposedly came from the Defense Department. And later on in the conversation, he suggests the document is classified and that he could have declassified it when he was president, but he can't now. And, this is supposed to be the smoking gun. One thing is really curious, I encourage people to go look at this, is that actually, if you look at that, there's no reference to a specific document that he's showing. And that's really notable, because they have another occasion in which they claim he showed someone a document, even as he also told them not to get too close because it was classified, and they reference a specific document. So I find that transcript kind of interesting. I think that there may be some more context around that, and Trump's attorneys are going to have to put it out there. And I guess that's why we're going to have a trial. But I just note that indictments are always meant to present the kind of worst case. Now the president's got to come and refute some of these allegations. And that's simply the case of the document. We can also have a conversation about the wisdom of going down this road with charges in the first place.
A couple things I would pull out from the indictment. One is just explanations of, according to the Justice Department, the kind of material that Trump had in these boxes stored at Mar-a-Lago. It says information regarding defense and weapons capabilities of both the United States and foreign countries, the United States nuclear programs, potential vulnerabilities of the United States and its allies to military attack, and plans for possible retaliation in response to a foreign attack. One of the things, Monet, that has been frustrating about this conversation all along is this information is classified. And so by definition, we are only given very unclear descriptions of what it is. And so information regarding United States nuclear programs, I can think of a lot of things that could be. Some of them pretty close to public knowledge or at least suspected, and some of them very, very sensitive. That would be damaging if adversaries got a hold of that. The other thing I would pull out is, I'll just read the section of what Kim was talking about. It says that in July 2021, at Trump's golf club in New Jersey, he had an audio recorded meeting with a writer, a publisher, two members of his staff, none of whom possessed a security clearance. Trump showed and described a plan of attack that Trump said was prepared for him by the Department of Defense and a senior military official. Trump told the individuals that the plan was highly confidential and secret. Trump also said, quote, "As president, I could have declassified it," and, quote, "Now I can't, but this is still a secret," unquote. And Monet, the importance of that to me is, I agree that the first question for the public here is going to be, is there a double standard being applied? And I think the point of that information is to distinguish it from some other cases, like Vice President Mike Pence had some classified documents at his home. When those documents were found, here's the statement by his office. It says, Vice President Pence was unaware of the existence of sensitive or classified documents at his personal residence. And I think what the Justice Department is trying to do in this indictment is make the argument that A, Trump knew that that stuff was in his possession, and B, Monet, that he knew that at least some of it was still classified when he was holding on to it.
I completely agree with the way you laid that out, Kyle, in the sense that I think the indictment provided answers to a lot of the questions that were looming at the time the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago to seize and review the documents, and at the time Merrick Garland first appointed Jack Smith as a special counsel to investigate Trump. And those questions surrounded what is the content of the documents and how was Trump's treatment of them, in the sense of, did he have the sense that he had authority to have them, or was he aware that he was potentially skirting the law or at least procedure by holding them at Mar-a-Lago? And the indictment seems to show that there was, first of all, extremely sensitive information contained in those documents pertaining to nuclear secrets, pertaining to national security, America's potential response to foreign threats. Some of that was speculated about, and there were leaks, some of which might have come from the Justice Department. that suggested particularly the part about the nuclear secrets, but I don't believe that was confirmed before the release of the indictment. And with regard to Trump and his claimed authority to potentially declassify all of these documents. This is a theory that some of his lawyers suggested at the time of the raid and which certain defenders of Trump pointed to, the fact that he has broad authority to declassify, the fact that he's quoted as potentially having said that he was in possession of documents which were still classified and yet was retaining them and showing them to people who didn't have security clearance at the compound suggests a kind of awareness of violation of procedures. And so neither of those reflects well for Donald Trump. I do think that Kim's question about Donald Trump's motive is still very important here in the sense that all we can point to thus far is recklessness in his handling of these documents, incredible recklessness, you could say, very fairly, but there isn't necessarily the type of malice that the Espionage Act is intended to address. And so that will be something that both the prosecutors and defense will continue to reckon with regard to exactly how grave was Trump's mishandling of the documents. But it is extremely important to have gained these new revelations from the indictment, and Trump's defense team, as we speak, I'm sure is beginning to think about how they will respond to them.
Kim, I wonder if you want to respond to that point on the motive or apparent lack thereof, which is something that I have been struggling to understand the whole time since the Mar-a-Lago raid and even before. And I was struck by something that former Attorney General Bill Barr recently told CBS. He said that this would have gone nowhere had the president just returned the documents, but he jerked them around for a year and a half, unquote. And so I don't know. I mean, it seems plausible to me that President Trump liked having these kind of classified trophies around to show off, or maybe he, as you suggested, he just didn't want people going through his things. There's also a quote in the indictment. This is one of President Trump's attorneys memorializing a meeting that he had with President Trump. And he recalls President Trump saying things like, I don't want anybody looking through my boxes. I really don't. I don't want you looking through my boxes. And so, Kim, maybe it is as simple as that. The president who never backed down didn't want to back down now.
Here's something that really strikes me about this indictment is that if you look at when the Justice Department has gone out of its way to prosecute people for the mishandling of classified information, there has been a very clear motive. Okay, Edward Snowden stole American secrets to undermine the United States. Sandy Berger, who used to work for Bill Clinton, admitted that he'd gone into the National Archives and stolen documents with the purpose of destroying them. Okay, former General David Petraeus admitted in a plea deal that he'd gone and given information, classified information, to a woman who happened to be his mistress, who was writing a story or an interview book about him. So this was he had a purpose in doing this. What this indictment fails to establish anywhere is a motive for Donald Trump doing any of this, and certainly not a nefarious one. And I think in the absence of that motive, you can look at this and you could ascribe to him all these very serious words like they have in the indictment, a conspiracy, etc. But to what end? There's no evidence he was giving this to foreign governments. There's no evidence that he was using it to personally profit in any way. And so in the absence of that, you can quite as easily fit this into Donald Trump's broad character, what we all know of him, right? Which is that he's has all this information in these boxes over the years in the White House, and some classified information gets dumped in with it. It ends up down in Mar-a-Lago. And because he's kind of lazy about these sort of things or whatever, he doesn't move quickly enough to return it to the Department of Justice. And in fact, is quite cavalier with these subpoenas and things that were coming in. In fact, may have even been resentful of it, given his whole history with the Department of Justice and the fact that DOJ was doing this. Now, does any of this excuse him for not being a little bit more cautious with some of this information? Absolutely not. But does it suggest the kind of nefarious purpose that would seem to be the only thing that would warrant this level of a special counsel and 37 charges? I find that harder to grasp, and especially given the extraordinary aspect of this and what it's likely to do to the country and the scene of a current president and Democratic Department of Justice indicting a former Republican president who also happens to be running for the presidency again against Joe Biden. It's a bad look. We would make fun of other countries that were doing something like that. And I think it's just something we need to really contemplate.